and welcome to Crowvane Manor. Wherever you are, and whatever kind of night it's been, you've come to the right place to slow down. Let the world go quiet for a while. Out here, none of it needs your attention. Many of you return to these rooms night after night, and I'm grateful for that. There's a reason you keep coming back. The stories kept inside these walls aren't quite like the ones you'll hear anywhere else. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. And if these stories stay with you, a like and a subscribe help more than you know. Now get comfortable, breathe slow, and let's open the door together. Back in the 80s, my family owned a small radio station in a small town. It was not some big city station with a huge staff, fancy offices, and people coming in and out all day like you see in movies. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. And the station itself felt more like an extension of the family than a business. In a small town, a radio station has a different kind of importance. People recognize the voices on air. They call in for songs, announcements, local news, school closings, weather updates, and little community things that would never matter to anyone outside the area, but meant everything to the people living there. The building was familiar to us, and the people who worked there were not just employees. A lot of them were friends, neighbors, and people who had known my family for years. My dad had been part of that world, too. He died suddenly when I was 7 years old, about 10 years before the incident I am talking about. His death was one of those things that split life into a before and after. When you lose a parent that young, you understand the loss in pieces as you grow. At 7, you know someone is gone, and you know the house feels different, but you do not understand all the ways their absence will keep showing up later. You understand more at 10, more at 15, and more again as an adult. My dad was gone physically, but in that radio station, it never felt like he had completely disappeared. People still talked about him. His friends still remembered him. The building itself still held pieces of his life, his work, his routines, and his presence. By the time this happened, around 10 years had passed since he died. The station had continued on without him, as places do. People kept working, broadcasts kept going out, equipment got repaired, rooms got rearranged, and the business stayed alive. The station had been remodeled at some point after my dad's death. Walls had been moved, spaces had changed, and the layout was not exactly the same as it had been when he was alive. That detail did not seem important at first. It was just part of the normal life of an old building. Businesses remodeled. Rooms get shifted around. A wall goes up where there used to be an opening. A doorway disappears. A hallway changes shape. People who come in later would never know what the old layout looked like unless someone told them. One evening, one of the DJs came in for his shift. He worked the evening slot, from 6 to 11 at night. That shift had its own feeling in a small radio station. The daytime traffic would be gone, the phones might slow down, and the building would start to feel quieter. Depending on the season, it might already be dark outside when he arrived, or getting dark. Evening radio has a strange loneliness to it, even when you are speaking to listeners. You are in a room with equipment, lights, switches, music, and your own voice, but much of the building around you can feel empty. A hallway that seems normal during the day can feel different at night. That night, the DJ came in shaken up. Not a little uneasy, not joking, not trying to tell a funny story to get attention. He was very, very shaken. He told people he had seen a man walking down the hall. That alone would have been strange if nobody else was there, but it was not the part that disturbed him the most. He said the man walked down the hallway and then walked right through a wall. Not through a door, not around a corner, through a wall. He was convinced of what he had seen. There was no hesitation in him, no sense that he was trying to make a weird noise into something dramatic. He had seen a man in the hall, and he had watched that man walk through a solid wall. That kind of claim is hard to respond to. In a normal workplace, people might laugh nervously, tell the person they must have been tired, or say maybe it was a shadow. But everyone could see how rattled he was. He was not acting like someone who had imagined a shape in the corner of his eye. He looked like someone whose understanding of the world had been interrupted for a moment. The station engineer was there, and he was a close friend of my dad's. That matters because he knew my dad well. He knew what he looked like, how he moved, and what his connection to that building had been. He also knew the history of the station, including the layout before the remodel. When the DJ described what he saw, the engineer did not just dismiss him. Instead, he did something very deliberate. He went into the office and got a group photo from a broadcast convention. There were about 30 men in that picture. It was not a photo of just my dad, and it was not something that would obviously guide the DJ to one person. It was a group photo, full of faces, the kind of picture where someone who did not know anyone would have to actually look carefully. The engineer showed the photo to the DJ and asked him to see if he recognized the man he had seen in the hallway. The DJ looked at the picture and picked out my dad immediately. That was the part that shook everyone. He had never met my dad. He had never seen him. My dad had died 10 years earlier, when I was 7, long before this DJ had any reason to know his face. There was no easy way for him to recognize him unless he had truly seen someone who looked exactly like him. He did not point to 3 people and say maybe it was one of them. He did not hesitate or guess. He picked my dad out of a group of around 30 men, immediately, like there was no question in his mind. That alone would have been enough to make the story hard to explain. But then there was the wall. The wall the DJ said my dad walked through had not been there when my dad was alive. During the remodel, the station had moved several walls and changed the layout. To someone working there after the remodel, that wall was simply a wall. It looked solid and permanent, part of the current building. But when my dad was alive, that spot had not been a wall. It had been where the door to the transmitter room was. So from the DJ's point of view, he saw a man walk through a wall. But from the perspective of the station, as it had been when my dad was alive, that man had walked through the doorway to the transmitter room. That detail still gives me chills. If someone were making up a ghost story, they might say they saw a figure vanish or walk through a wall because it sounds spooky. But the fact that the wall had once been a doorway, and specifically a doorway my dad would have known and used, made the whole thing feel different. It was as if he was moving through the building the way it used to be, not the way it was now. He was not obeying the remodel. He was following the old layout, the one that existed when he was alive. To him, or to whatever the DJ saw, there was still a door there. The engineer then admitted something that made it even more unsettling. He said he had also seen my dad in there before, but he had never told anyone. That admission changed the whole mood of the story. It meant the DJ was not the first person to experience something strange connected to my father at the station. The engineer had known my dad. He had been his close friend. If anyone might recognize him, it would have been him. And he had seen him too. But he had kept it to himself, probably because he did not want to sound crazy, or because he did not know what to do with it. Or maybe because seeing the ghost of a dead friend in a place they once worked is not the kind of thing you casually bring up over coffee. People often stay quiet about experiences like that until someone else says something first. Then the silence breaks. I can only imagine how the engineer felt when that DJ came in describing a man walking through the wall. Maybe part of him knew before he even pulled out the photo. Maybe he had been carrying his own sighting quietly and suddenly realized someone else had seen the same thing. Maybe he wanted to test it, to see if the DJ would identify my dad without being led. And when the DJ picked him out immediately, that must have confirmed something the engineer had been trying not to say out loud. It shook all of us up. How could it not? This was not just a random ghost story about a strange building. This was my dad, my father, who had died suddenly when I was a child. My father, whose absence had already shaped so much of my life. The idea that someone had seen him walking through the radio station years after his death was emotional and unsettling in a way that is hard to explain. It was not just scary. It was personal. It brought him back into the room, but not in a way anyone could touch or talk to. It made his absence feel present. I have never seen a ghost myself. I do not really believe in ghosts, at least not in the easy way some people do. I am not someone who sees every strange shadow and decides it must be a spirit. I know people misremember things. I know buildings make noises. I know eyes and brains can trick us, especially in dim light or when someone is tired. I know grief can make people feel things strongly. I know there are plenty of normal explanations for many so-called hauntings. I understand all of that. If someone else told me a story like this, part of me would probably try to find a rational answer first. But this one has always been hard for me to explain away. The DJ did not know my dad. He had no reason to pick him out of that photo. There were around 30 men in it. He could have chosen anyone. He could have been unsure. He could have said none of them looked familiar. But he pointed to my dad right away. The wall he saw the man walk through was not there when my dad was alive. That spot used to be the entrance to the transmitter room. And the engineer, who knew my dad well and had no reason to make things up, admitted that he had seen him too. Maybe there is a normal explanation somewhere. Maybe the DJ had seen a photo of my dad without remembering it. Maybe someone had talked about him, and his mind filled in the rest. Maybe the lighting in the hall made someone else look like him, and the wall part was a trick of perception. Maybe memory sharpened the details after the fact. I am willing to consider those things. But none of them fully settle it. They do not explain the immediate recognition. They do not explain the old doorway. They do not explain the engineer's quiet confession that he had seen him before. The transmitter room detail is the part that stays with me the most. A radio station is a place of voices and signals, of sound moving invisibly through the air. People speak into a microphone, and their voices travel out into homes, cars, shops, and quiet rooms miles away. There is something already strange about that if you think about it too long. A person can be in one room, and their voice can fill a whole town. My dad had been part of that. His life, his work, his routines, and his friendships were tied to that station. If any place would hold on to some trace of him, maybe it would be there. I do not know what the DJ saw. I do not know what the engineer saw. I do not know if it was my dad in some real sense, or a memory of him, or something about the building replaying an old pattern. I do not know if people leave behind energy in places where they spent important parts of their lives. I do not know if love, grief, work, and sudden death can mark a place in ways we do not understand. I only know that a man who had never met my father walked into that station, shaken to his core, and described seeing him walk through a wall that used to be a doorway. For me, the story has always sat somewhere between comfort and fear. It is unsettling because it suggests something impossible happened in that hallway. But it is also strangely comforting because it was my dad. He was not seen doing anything frightening. He was not threatening anyone. He was walking through the station, moving through the building as if he still belonged there. Maybe he did. Maybe some part of him still knew that place, still knew the old door to the transmitter room, still followed the path he had taken when he was alive. After the DJ picked him out of the photo and the engineer admitted he had seen him too, the station did not feel quite the same to us. How could it? A hallway is just a hallway until someone sees your dead father walking down it. A wall is just a wall until you learn that. To him, it may still be a door. The building had changed, but maybe not completely. Maybe the old station still existed underneath the new one in some way, not physically, but in memory. Maybe my dad's version of that building had never been remodeled. I still do not call myself a believer. I still have never seen a ghost with my own eyes. But whenever people talk about hauntings, or spirits, or places holding on to the dead, I think of that small radio station in the 80s. I think of the evening DJ coming in shaken and pale, insisting that he saw a man walk down the hall and through a wall. I think of the engineers silently going to get that broadcast convention photo. I think of the DJ scanning 30 faces and pointing straight at my father, a man he had never met and had no reason to recognize. I think of the wall that used to be the door to the transmitter room, and I think of the engineer finally admitting that he had seen him too. I do not know what to do with that, even now. I do not have a neat explanation. I do not have proof in the scientific sense. I only have the story, the people who were there, and the details that never quite fit into the ordinary world. Maybe ghosts are not real. Maybe there is some explanation we never found. But if there was ever one story that made me pause before saying, I do not believe, it is this one. My dad had been gone for 10 years, and yet somehow, someone who had never known him saw him walking through the radio station like he was still on his way to the transmitter room. When I was around 4 or 5 years old, I went to a theme park with my family. I was still very young enough that most memories from that age are soft around the edges and hard to trust completely. But this one has stayed with me in a way that does not feel like a normal childhood memory. It is one of those things that I can still picture clearly, even though so many other moments from that time in my life are gone. I remember the feeling of being small in a huge, busy place. I remember the noise, the colors, the smell of food, the sound of rides moving somewhere in the distance, and the feeling of being surrounded by people taller than me. Everything at a theme park feels bigger when you are that age. The buildings look bigger, the rides look higher, the costumes look more real, and the crowds feel like they could swallow you if you let go of the person you came with. We were all waiting in line for a log ride. I remember that part because the line was long enough for a little kid to get bored. Adults can stand in a line and talk, but when you are 4 or 5, waiting feels endless. You shift your feet, look around, hold on to railings, ask how much longer, and then ask again 5 minutes later. The log ride must have been popular, because there were plenty of people around us. I was with my family, and I should have stayed close to them. At that age, you are supposed to stay where your parents can see you, especially in a crowded theme park. But for some reason, I wandered off by myself. I do not remember deciding to do it. That is part of what makes the memory strange. I do not remember thinking I want to leave the line or I want to go explore. I just remember that at some point, I was no longer standing with my family. I had drifted away from the line, only a short distance, but far enough that I was alone. I was still close enough that I could probably hear the crowd in the ride area, but I was separated from my family in the way that feels much bigger to a small child than it really is. I was in that little space between being safe and being lost. Nothing terrible had happened yet, but I was no longer where I was supposed to be. A short distance from the line, I came upon a small flight of stairs. I do not remember seeing a sign for them. I do not remember a gate, a rope, or anything warning people not to go down. I am not even sure anyone else knew they were there. They did not feel like part of the main park path. They felt hidden, like something tucked away where guests were not really supposed to notice. The stairs were close enough to the log ride line that I had found them just by wandering. But they also felt separate from the noise and movement of the crowd. Even now, when I think about them, they feel like they belong to a different part of the park, one that was not meant for regular visitors. I walked over to the stairs and started going down. I only went down the first couple of steps before I stopped. I was little, so even a small staircase felt like an entrance to somewhere important. Going down those few steps changed the view around me. The sound of the crowd seemed farther away. The main path felt behind me. I remember looking down and seeing an area below, and that was when I saw them. At the bottom of the stairs, or somewhere lower down, there were what I assumed were people dressed as the Easter Bunny. There were about 2 or 3 of them. They were standing there together, wearing rabbit costumes, the kind with big heads and long ears. At first, because I was so young, I probably tried to understand them the only way I knew how. Theme parks have characters. People walk around in costumes. Kids take pictures with them. Adults wave children over to meet them. That is normal in a place like that. So my first thought must have been that they were park characters, maybe people dressed up for children. But almost immediately, something felt wrong. The park we were at had nothing to do with rabbits or Easter. It was not an Easter event. It was not even that time of year. There were no Easter decorations, no spring celebration, no bunny-themed section that I knew of, and none of the other characters walking around the park were dressed as Easter rabbits. Everything else around the park made sense in its own way. The rides had themes, the workers had uniforms, and the costumed characters belonged to whatever world the park was trying to create. But these rabbit figures did not belong. They looked out of place, and even as a very young child, I could feel that. They saw me. That is the part of the memory that still makes my skin crawl. They were not just standing there doing nothing. They noticed me. They turned their attention toward me, and then they waved. It was not a normal, friendly wave that made me want to run down and hug them. It felt wrong. They started trying to beckon me down the stairs, motioning for me to come closer. They wanted me to keep coming down. I remember them using their hands or arms, waving and calling me forward in that silent way costumed characters do when they cannot speak or when they are trying to seem playful. But there was nothing playful about it to me. I got a bad feeling immediately. It is hard to explain a child's bad feeling because children do not always have the words for danger. At 4 or 5, you may not be able to say, this situation is suspicious, or these people should not be here, or I am being lured away from my family. You just feel it. Your stomach tightens. Your body freezes. Something inside you says no. That was what happened to me. I was only a few steps down, looking at these strange rabbit figures who were trying to get me to come farther away from the line and away from my family, and every part of me suddenly knew I should not go. The costumes themselves are hard to remember in perfect detail, but the feeling of them has never left. They were supposed to look cheerful, I think. Easter bunny costumes are usually made to be cute, soft, and friendly. But when something friendly appears in the wrong place, it can become frightening in a way that something openly scary never could. A monster looks like a monster, so your fear makes sense. But a smiling rabbit costume at the bottom of a hidden staircase in a theme park, waving for a little child to come down, feels wrong in a deeper way. The fact that they were trying to look welcoming made them more unsettling, not less. I did not go down. I turned and ran back to my family. I remember being frightened, but also confused. I did not fully understand what I had seen or why it scared me so much. I just knew I needed to get back to the line, back to the adults, back to the crowd, back to the normal part of the park. I ran up the steps or away from them as fast as my little legs could move, and I returned to my family standing in line for the log ride. I do not remember exactly what I told them at the time, or if I told them clearly at all. I was young, and when children are scared, they do not always explain things in a way adults take seriously. Maybe I said I saw bunnies. Maybe I said there were people downstairs. Maybe I just came back quiet and frightened. What I remember most is the feeling of safety returning when I got back to my family, and the strange knowledge that I had almost gone somewhere I should not have gone. For years after that, the memory bothered me. It was not the kind of scary memory where something jumped out or chased me. Nothing actually happened to me. I did not get hurt. No one grabbed me. I made it back to my family. But that is exactly why it became so strange. It was a near moment. A moment where something could have gone wrong, but did not. I kept thinking about how odd it was that there were Easter Bunny figures there at all. Why would there be 2 or 3 of them in a hidden area near a ride, away from the main path? Why would they be standing at the bottom of a little staircase? Why would they be trying to call a small child down toward them? Why did I feel so strongly that I should not go? As I got older, I thought about more practical explanations. Maybe they were workers from the park on a break. Maybe they were costume performers changing areas or waiting to come out somewhere. Maybe there had been some kind of event I did not know about. Maybe the costumes were not Easter bunnies, but some other kind of character that my little kid brain interpreted as rabbits. Maybe they were not beckoning me in a dangerous way, but simply waving because I had seen them. Those explanations are possible, and I understand that memory from early childhood can be strange. I know a 4 or 5-year-old does not always understand what they are seeing, but none of those explanations fully satisfy me, because the feeling I had was so strong. Even now, the memory has a wrongness to it. If they were normal park workers, why were they in a place that felt so hidden? Why were there multiple bunny figures when the park had no rabbit or Easter theme? Why were they not on the main path with the other characters? Why was there a staircase there at all? And why did it feel like nobody else knew about it? The whole scene felt separate from the rest of the park, like I had wandered into a gap where I was not meant to be. A few years later, I went back to that same theme park. By then, I was older, old enough to remember the strange staircase and want to find it again. I did not go back because I expected to see the rabbit figures. I think I just wanted to prove to myself that the place existed. I wanted to find the stairs and understand where they led. Maybe if I saw them again in daylight, with older eyes, I could explain it. Maybe the staircase would turn out to be part of a staff area, or an old exit, or some hidden maintenance path. Maybe there would be a sign or a gate that made sense of everything. I wanted the memory to become normal. So I went back to the area where I remembered the staircase being. I looked around carefully. I tried to match the location in my memory with the real park around me. I remembered it being a short distance from the log ride line. I remembered the direction I had wandered. I remembered the feeling of finding the stairs tucked away nearby. But when I searched for them, I found no sign of them. No staircase. No hidden steps, no doorway, no lower area where costumed people could have stood. Nothing that matched what I remembered. The place where I thought the stairs should be was just normal park space. That made the memory even stranger. Of course, theme parks change over time. They remodel, rebuild, close off areas, move lines, and remove old paths. It is possible the stairs had been there when I was little and were removed or covered by the time I returned. It is possible I remembered the location wrong. I was very young during the first visit, and the park would have seemed much larger then. A small distance to a child can feel different later. I know all of that. But standing there years later and finding no trace of the staircase left me with the same uneasy feeling I had as a child. It felt like I had stumbled onto something that was not supposed to stay visible. The whole thing remains one of the strangest memories of my life. It was not dramatic, but it was deeply unsettling. A small child wanders away from family in a theme park. A hidden staircase appears nearby. At the bottom are 2 or 3 people dressed like Easter bunnies, even though the park has nothing to do with Easter or rabbits, and it is not that season. They see the child, wave, and try to beckon the child down. The child feels something is wrong and runs back. Years later, the child returns to find the staircase and discovers no sign of it at all. I still wonder what would have happened if I had kept going down those stairs. Maybe nothing. Maybe I would have found a staff area and some confused workers in costumes. Maybe someone would have gently taken me back to my parents. Maybe the whole thing was harmless and my child instincts overreacted. But I do not like that, maybe. I do not like imagining myself walking down those last steps toward them. I do not like the idea of those rabbit heads turning toward me, those gloved hands waving me closer, the crowd noise fading behind me. Even now, as an adult, that image feels wrong. There is also something frightening about costume characters when they are not where they should be. In the middle of a parade or a bright walkway, they can seem fun. But place them at the bottom of a hidden staircase, away from the crowd, and suddenly the costume becomes a mask. You cannot see the person inside. You cannot read their face. You do not know if they are smiling, angry, or watching you carefully. All you see is the oversized head, the frozen expression, and the hand telling you to come closer. For a little kid, that is confusing. For an adult looking back, it is terrifying. I will never know who or what they were. I will never know if that staircase was real in the normal sense, or if my memory has turned something ordinary into something strange. But I know I saw what I saw. I know I felt that bad feeling, strong enough to make me run. And I know that when I went back years later, I could not find the staircase anywhere. The park was still there. The log ride area was still familiar. But the little hidden path I remembered had disappeared, along with the rabbit figures that had waited below it. Sometimes I think about how close I came to going down those stairs. Children are curious, and theme parks teach children to trust costumes. If a character waves, you usually go closer. If a bunny costume beckons, a little kid might think it is an invitation to something fun. But something in me knew not to follow them. I do not know if it was instinct, fear, or just a child sensing that something did not belong. Whatever it was, I am grateful for it. That day at the theme park should have been just another family memory. A line for a log ride, a little kid getting bored, and then the ride itself. Instead, what stayed with me was a hidden staircase and 2 or 3 Easter bunny figures standing below, waving me down at the wrong time of year in a park that had nothing to do with rabbits. I ran back to my family, and I never saw them again. Years later, I could not even find the stairs. It remains the strangest thing that ever happened to me there, and I still cannot explain it. Back in 2001, I was driving back from Las Vegas with some friends. We were from Canada, and at that time, a trip like that felt like a real adventure. Vegas itself had been loud, bright, busy, and full of that strange energy the city has, where everything seems to glow and move and make noise at all hours. But once you leave it behind and start heading north through the desert, the world changes quickly. The lights drop away. The crowds disappear. The roads get longer and darker. Suddenly, all the noise of the city feels like it belonged to another planet. You are left with open land, black sky, and the steady sound of the car moving through the night. We had set out fairly late because we wanted to do most of the drive at night. That seemed like a good idea at the time. There would be less traffic, the heat would not be as bad, and we figured the drive would feel easier if the roads were mostly empty. When you are young and traveling with friends, driving at night can even feel exciting. There is a kind of freedom to it. Everyone is tired, but still wired from the trip, and the road ahead feels endless. You stop for gas when you can, grab snacks, switch drivers if needed, and keep going. The desert at night has a beauty to it, too. The sky is huge, and if you are far enough from towns, the stars look clearer than they do almost anywhere else. But that same emptiness can start to feel unsettling after a while. The further you get from city lights, the more you understand how alone you really are out there. We were heading north through the desert, and for long stretches, there was almost nothing around us. No buildings, no streetlights, no gas stations, no other cars passing every few seconds like you expect on a normal highway. The road just kept going through the darkness. The headlights showed us the lane ahead, and beyond that, everything disappeared into black. It is strange how much you depend on other lights when driving at night. Even one car ahead of you can make the road feel less lonely. Its taillights become a point to follow, a reminder that someone else is out there moving in the same direction. Without that, the road can start to feel like it belongs only to you. At some point, we found ourselves following a car that was about 1 kilometer ahead of us. We could not see much of the car itself because it was dark, but we could see the taillights. They were small red points far ahead, glowing in the emptiness, since there was nothing else out there making light. Those taillights stood out clearly. Even from far away, they were easy to track. They became the only sign of another person on that stretch of road. We were not close enough to feel like we were traveling together, but close enough that we kept noticing them. The lights moved with the shape of the road, sometimes rising or dipping slightly, sometimes shifting as the highway turned. For a while, they gave us something to focus on besides the endless dark. Inside the car, we were probably talking the way people do during a long night drive. Conversations come and go on trips like that. Sometimes everyone is chatting. Sometimes one person is half asleep. Sometimes the driver is quiet and the others are staring out the windows. The desert makes people a little quiet after a while. It is hard not to watch the darkness. I remember the feeling of the road, the distance, and those red lights ahead. They were not doing anything strange at first. They were just there, steady and normal, leading the way through a lonely stretch of highway. Then, at one point, the lights just disappeared. They did not fade slowly. They did not drift behind a hill in a way that gave us time to understand what was happening. They were there, and then they were gone. Just gone, in the middle of the desert. At first, none of us panicked. The most obvious explanation was that there was a turn ahead. Maybe the car had gone around a corner, and the angle of the road or the land had blocked the taillights from our view. That made sense. Roads in the desert can look straight for a long time and then suddenly bend around a rock face, a drop, or a hill. From a distance at night, you might not see the road change until you are almost on top of it. So we figured there was probably a corner ahead and did not think too much of it. Still, the disappearance felt sharp enough that it caught our attention. We were all aware of it. Those lights had been the only thing ahead of us, and when they vanished, the road suddenly felt much emptier. The darkness in front of us looked deeper without them. For the next little while, we kept driving toward the place where they had disappeared. I remember expecting to see the road bend, expecting the lights to reappear at any second once the car came out from behind whatever had blocked it. But they did not come back. The blackness ahead stayed empty. When we got to the spot where the lights had vanished, there was, in fact, a sharp right turn. That seemed to explain it at first. The road turned hard because there was a cliff, and the highway ran along it for a while before eventually switching back. In the moment, that made us feel like we had solved the first part of the mystery. The car ahead had reached the sharp turn, gone around it, and the angle had hidden the taillights from us. Nothing strange there. We slowed and took the turn carefully because in the dark, with a cliff nearby, you do not want to take chances. The headlights swept across the road, the edge, and the darkness beyond, and then we followed the highway along the cliff. But then the road switched back. Once we made the switchback, we expected to see the taillights again. That was the natural thing. The other car had only been about 1 kilometer ahead, and we had not been stopped long. It should still have been somewhere in front of us. After the switchback, the road became straight for several kilometers. There was nothing blocking the view, no sharp corner hiding it anymore, no hills in the way, no town lights to confuse us, just a long, straight stretch of dark desert highway where any tail lights ahead should have been visible for a long distance. But we never saw them again. That was when the situation stopped feeling normal. We all noticed. It was not one person staring out the window and missing something. We were watching for that car. We expected it to be there. It had been ahead of us for a while, and because there was nothing else out there, its lights should have been easy to find again. But the road ahead was empty, completely empty. There were no red lights in the distance, no glow around another bend, no sign of a car pulling away. Nothing. We kept driving, looking ahead, waiting for the lights to reappear. They never did. The road stretched out straight in front of us, and the desert stayed dark. That lonely feeling came back stronger now, because the only other car we knew was out there seemed to have vanished. At first, we tried to explain it in ordinary ways. Maybe the driver had turned off somewhere. But there did not seem to be anywhere to turn off. No side road, no driveway, no rest stop, no place a car could have gone without us noticing. Maybe they had sped up dramatically. But even then, on a long, straight road in pitch-black desert, we should have seen the tail lights far ahead, at least for a while. Maybe they had pulled over and turned their lights off. But why would anyone do that in the middle of nowhere? At night, in the desert. The more we thought about it, the fewer explanations there were. One possibility was that the driver had simply turned off their lights. That is technically possible. A person could do that. But it would be incredibly dangerous. Out there in the pitch-black desert with cliffs and sharp turns and no streetlights, turning off your lights would make no sense. You would not be able to see the road. Other drivers would not be able to see you. It would be asking for an accident. And if they had turned the lights off after the turn, we still should have eventually seen something when our headlights got closer. A reflection, the shape of the car, brake lights turning back on, anything. We saw nothing. Another possibility was that the car had gone over the cliff. That thought was the one none of us liked. The sharp right turn had been there because of the cliff. The road ran along it for a while before switching back. If the driver ahead had missed the turn, or gone too fast, or drifted off, maybe the taillights disappeared because the car went over the edge. In the dark, from where we were, it might have looked like they simply vanished. By the time we reached the spot, Maybe there was no obvious sign from the road. Maybe the car was somewhere below, out of sight. That idea made the silence of the road feel horrible. We looked for signs, but at night, with limited visibility, it was hard to know what we would even see. No fire, no headlights below, no movement, no sound, nothing. The third possibility was the one that sounds impossible, but is also the one that felt like it fit the experience. The car just disappeared. I know how that sounds. Cars do not simply disappear. There is always a road, a turn, a stop, a crash, a reason. But that night, from our point of view, the red tail lights ahead of us vanished in the middle of the desert, and after we passed the turn and the switchback, there was no car anywhere. No lights, no side road, no trace. It was like the vehicle had gone around the corner and left the world. The desert made the whole thing feel stranger. In a city, disappearing taillights are normal. Cars turn down side streets, pull into parking lots, merge into traffic, or get hidden behind buildings. There are lights everywhere, so you can lose track easily. But out there was nothing to hide behind once the road straightened. No traffic, no buildings, no neighborhoods. The darkness actually made the taillights easier to see, not harder, because they were the only points of red light for miles. That is why their disappearance bothered us so much. We had been able to see them from really far off before. There was no reason we should not have seen them again. I remember the feeling inside the car after that. The conversation changed. Everyone became more alert. It was not panic exactly, but it was uneasy. We kept asking each other where the car could have gone. Someone would offer an explanation, and then someone else would point out why it did not work. Maybe they turned off. There was nowhere to turn. Maybe they sped up. We should still see them. Maybe they turned off their lights. Why would they do that? Maybe they crashed. Then where were the lights, the smoke, the noise, the wreckage? Every answer created another question. We were from Canada, driving through an unfamiliar desert at night, far from home, and suddenly the road felt less like a normal highway and more like a place where something could happen, and no one would ever know. That is one of the scariest things about remote roads. If a car does go over a cliff, if someone disappears, if something goes wrong, there may not be another person nearby for a long time. The desert can swallow things. A vehicle can leave the road, drop out of sight, and the world above can go quiet again. That thought sat heavily with us as we kept driving. Part of me still wonders if we should have stopped and looked more carefully. But stopping on a dark desert highway near a cliff in the middle of the night is not a simple decision, especially when you are far from home and do not know the road. We did not have the kind of visibility you would want for a search. We did not know exactly what we had seen or where the car might have gone. There may have been no safe place to stop. And at the time, we were still trying to convince ourselves there was some normal explanation, that maybe we would see the taillights again around the next rise or far ahead on the next straight stretch. But we never did. Years later, that is what keeps the memory alive for me. Not a crash, not a ghostly figure, not a dramatic event, but the absence of something that should have been there. Two red lights in the desert, steady and visible for a long time, then nothing. The moment they disappeared could be explained by the sharp turn, yes, but the fact that they never returned after the switchback and straight road is the part that still does not sit right. Maybe the driver did go over the cliff, and we simply never saw the evidence. That is the darkest explanation, because it means we might have passed close to a terrible accident without knowing for sure. Maybe somewhere below that road, hidden by the night and the shape of the land, there was a car we could not see. Maybe the lights were broken or facing away from us. Maybe the people inside needed help. I do not like thinking about that possibility, but it is there. Maybe the driver turned off their lights for some reason we will never understand. Maybe they were local and knew the road well enough to pull onto a hidden dirt track we did not notice. Maybe there was a small turnout or service road that was invisible in the dark. That is the most practical explanation. And maybe it is true. But even now, I remember how straight and empty that road looked afterward. I remember how far we could see. I remember how badly we expected to see those lights again. Or maybe, as strange as it sounds, that car was something we were never meant to catch up to. Maybe it was there only until the turn. A pair of red lights leading us through the dark. And then it was gone. I am not saying that is what I believe. I do not know what I believe about it. I only know what we saw. A car ahead of us in the desert. Its tail lights visible because there was no other light for miles, and then those lights vanished at a bend near a cliff. When the road opened up again, the car was nowhere to be seen. We kept driving north after that, but the rest of the drive felt different. The desert no longer felt peaceful or empty in a beautiful way. It felt watchful, like it had shown us something and then closed back over it. Every dark shape near the road looked like it could be hiding something. Every bend felt a little more serious. I kept looking ahead for red tail lights, hoping to see them far in the distance and laugh off the whole thing. But they never appeared. To this day, I do not know what happened to that car. Either it disappeared, the driver inexplicably turned off their lights in the middle of the pitch-black desert, or they went over the cliff. None of those answers feel good. One is impossible, one is reckless, and one is tragic. But one of them, or something even stranger, happened that night on the road north from Las Vegas. And all these years later, I can still picture those taillights ahead of us, tiny and red in the darkness, right before they vanished. It was 2013, and my dad had just picked me up from private school. I was in second grade at the time, still young enough that most days felt simple and routine, especially when my dad came to get me. School would end, I would get in the car, and we would drive home like we had done so many times before. There was nothing about that day that felt special at first. It was just another school day ending, another ride home with my father. Another ordinary afternoon that should have disappeared into memory like hundreds of others. But that day stayed with me because of one small thing my father did before we drove away. Something he had never done before and never did again. After he picked me up, we stopped so I could get a Krispy Kreme donut. I loved Krispy Kreme back then. To a second grader, getting a donut after school felt like a huge treat, the kind of thing that could make the whole day better. I remember that small happiness more clearly than I remember anything about school that day. The smell of sugar, the warm sweetness, the excitement of getting something I liked. It was a normal little moment between a father and his child. Nothing dramatic, nothing strange. We went into the store, got the donut, and then came back out to the car. When we left the store and I got into the car, I went to the passenger side back seat like I always did. That was my usual seat. Kids often have their favorite seat in a car, and that was mine. I did not think about it because I had done it so many times. It was automatic. I opened the door and started getting in on the passenger side of the back seat like it was any other day. But for some reason, my father stopped me. He told me to get on his side of the back seat instead. I thought it was very odd. It was not something he normally asked me to do. In fact, he had never told me to change seats before. Not once that I can remember. There was no obvious reason for it. It was not like something was spilled on the seat. It was not like there were bags or boxes in the way. It was not like I was fighting with another kid over where to sit, because it was just me and him. I was old enough to notice that the request was unusual, but young enough that I did not question it much. When you are in second grade and your parent tells you to do something, you usually just do it, even if it seems strange. I thought it was weird, but I did not argue. I moved over and sat behind my father instead. That one decision is the reason I am alive. At the time, of course, I had no idea. To me, it was just a strange seat change. I probably focused more on my donut than on anything else. I may have wondered for a moment why my dad cared where I sat. But then the thought passed. Kids do not always hold on to small, odd moments unless something happens afterward to make them important. We got back on the road and started heading home. It was the same kind of ride we had made plenty of times. I was in the back seat, not in my usual place, but still comfortable enough, and my father was driving. There was no warning in the air, no bad feeling that I remember, no sense that something terrible was about to happen. On our way home, we came up to a major intersection. It was one of those busy intersections where traffic moves in different directions, and everyone depends on the lights and signals to keep things in order. Most of the time, you pass through intersections without thinking much about how dangerous they really are. You trust that red means stop and green means go. You trust that other drivers are paying attention. You trust the normal rhythm of the road. But sometimes all it takes is one moment, one emergency, one person not stopping, or one car in the wrong place, and everything changes. There was an ambulance behind us with its lights and siren on. Because it was responding to an emergency, traffic had to move out of the way. My dad had to react like everyone else on the road would in that situation. With the ambulance coming behind us, we ended up going through a red light. I do not remember the exact details of how it happened, whether cars were pulling aside, whether the ambulance was directly behind us, or whether my dad was trying to clear the intersection so the ambulance could get through. I was just a little kid in the back seat, and the memory breaks around that point. What I know is that we went through the red light because of the ambulance, and then everything changed. The next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital. That is one of the strangest and scariest ways to understand that something bad has happened. One moment in your memory, you are in the car with your father after getting a donut. The next, you are in a hospital bed, surrounded by lights, nurses, doctors, machines, and confusion. There is a blank space in between where the accident happened, and your mind has to catch up to your body. I do not remember the impact clearly. I do not remember the sound of the crash, the moment of fear, or what happened immediately after. My memory simply cuts from the ride home to the hospital. That missing piece is terrifying in its own way, because it means whatever happened was powerful enough to take me out of the moment completely. Someone had hit our car when we went through that light. I was in the hospital for a few days, maybe a week. I do not remember exactly how long because I was young, and time in a hospital feels strange even for adults. Days are measured by people coming in and out, checking on you, asking how you feel, giving medicine, taking tests, and making sure you are healing. As a child, I probably did not fully understand how serious everything had been. I knew I had been in an accident. I knew I had gotten hurt enough to be in the hospital. But I did not yet understand how close I had come to something much worse. I came out mostly unscathed, which is almost unbelievable when I think about it now. I had been in a serious crash, but I survived, and I did not suffer the kind of injuries that could have changed my life forever. Later, my father showed me pictures of the car we had been in. That was when the reality of what had happened became clear. The passenger side of the car was completely smashed in. The side where I always sat, the seat I had started to get into after we left Krispy Kreme, had taken the worst of the impact. The rear passenger seat was crushed, not just damaged a little. Crushed. Looking at those pictures, there was no way to pretend it had been a small accident. There was no way to look at that seat and think a child sitting there would have been fine. The place where I would normally have been was destroyed. If my father had not told me to change seats, I would have been dead. That is not an exaggeration. That is what the pictures showed. That is what everyone understood after the accident. Had I been sitting in my usual seat on the passenger side of the back seat, the impact would have hit right where I was. There would not have been enough protection. There would not have been enough space. There would not have been some lucky angle to save me. The side of the car was smashed in exactly where I would have been sitting. But because my father told me, for no clear reason, to sit behind him instead, I survived. That part has never left me. My father had never told me to change seats before. Not before that day. Not in all the times he picked me up and drove me home. And after that day, he never told me to do it again. It was a one-time thing. A single instruction at the exact moment it mattered. If he had not said anything, I would have sat where I always sat. If I had argued, even for a few seconds, maybe things would have been different. If he had ignored whatever made him tell me to move, I might not be here now. I have thought many times about what made him say it. Did he have a sudden bad feeling? Did something inside him tell him to move me? Did he notice something about the road, the traffic, or the car that I could not see? Or was it just a random thought that turned out to be life-saving by coincidence? I do not know. I was too young to ask the right questions at the time, and even if I had asked, I am not sure he would have had an answer. Sometimes adults do things on instinct without knowing why. They tell a child to move, to wait, to stop, to come closer, or to sit somewhere else. And only later does everyone understand how important that instinct was. The most frightening thing about it is how ordinary the moment was. There was no dramatic warning, no dream the night before, no voice telling him what to do, at least not one I know of. No obvious danger when we were leaving the donut shop. It was just my father telling me to sit on the other side of the back seat. It probably took only a few seconds. A tiny moment. But that tiny moment changed everything. The difference between my usual seat and the seat behind my father was the difference between dying and surviving. As a child, I do not think I fully understood how close it had been. Children can be told something serious and still not feel the full weight of it until later. I knew the car had been damaged. I knew the hospital was scary. I knew my dad had saved me by changing my seat. But the true meaning of it grows as you get older. When you become older, you understand how fragile life is. You understand how quickly an ordinary day can become a tragedy. You understand that sometimes survival depends on details so small you would never notice them in the moment. A donut stop, a seat change, an ambulance behind you, a red light, another car entering the intersection, a few inches of metal, a child sitting on one side instead of the other. Every part of that chain had to happen exactly the way it did for me to live. If we had left the store a minute earlier or later, maybe the accident would not have happened. If we had not stopped for the donut, maybe we would have been through the intersection long before. If the ambulance had not been behind us, maybe we would not have gone through the red light. If my father had not moved me, maybe I would have been in a crushed seat. It is strange to think about how many small decisions lead to one moment, and how one of those decisions can save a life without anyone understanding why at the time. I also think about what it must have been like for my father. He was the one driving. He was the one who told me to change seats. He was the one who later saw the damage and understood what his instruction had done. I cannot imagine the feeling of realizing your child would have died if you had not followed some random instinct. The relief must have been overwhelming, but so must the fear. He had to look at those pictures and see the place I should have been sitting. He had to understand that a few words from him before we left the donut shop had changed the outcome of the accident. That kind of realization stays with a parent forever. I have no memory of him making a big deal out of the seat change before the crash. He did not explain it. He did not make it sound urgent. He simply told me to sit on his side of the back seat. Maybe that makes it even stranger. If he had said, "I feel weird, move over," or "something tells me you should sit there," then maybe we could say he had a clear premonition. But as far as I remember, it was just a simple instruction. That makes it easier to overlook, but also harder to explain. Why that day? Why that seat? Why that one time? There are people who might say it was only coincidence, and maybe it was. Coincidences happen. Parents make random choices all the time. Kids move seats for no reason. Accidents happen. Sometimes a random choice saves someone, and there is no deeper meaning beyond luck. I understand that. But when you are the person who survived because of that random choice, it does not feel small. It feels like something reached into an ordinary moment and shifted you a few feet away from death. I am not saying I know what that something was. Maybe it was my father's instinct. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was some tiny subconscious detail he noticed without realizing it. Maybe it was a warning he could not name. Maybe it was just one of those moments in life where everything lines up in a way that feels impossible afterward. But whatever it was, I am here because of it. The image of the crushed passenger side stays with me. Not because I saw the accident happen, but because the picture told the story my memory could not. My mind does not remember the impact, but the car did. The smashed metal showed exactly where the danger went. The rear passenger seat, my usual seat, was crushed. That photograph became the missing piece between leaving Krispy Kreme and waking up in the hospital. It showed me what I had been spared. I still think about that day sometimes. I think about being a second grader, excited about a donut. Climbing into the back seat without knowing my life was about to depend on where I sat. I think about my father telling me to move to his side. I think about how strange I thought it was, but how quickly I obeyed. I think about the ambulance, the intersection, the crash I cannot remember, and the hospital I woke up in. I think about the pictures of the car and the seat that was destroyed. And I think about the fact that my father never asked me to change seats before that day, and never asked me to do it again. That is the part that makes the story stay with me. It was not a habit. It was not a rule. It was not something he always did for safety. It happened one time, on the exact day it needed to happen. One small instruction from my father kept me out of the part of the car that was crushed. If he had not said it, I would not be here to tell the story. I do not know if you would call that a premonition, instinct, luck, or something else. I only know that in 2013, after my dad picked me up from private school and we stopped for a Krispy Kreme donut, he told me to sit on his side of the back seat instead of the passenger side where I always sat. I thought it was odd, but I listened. On the way home, we were hit at a major intersection while moving through because of an ambulance behind us. I woke up in the hospital, and later I saw the pictures. The passenger side was destroyed. The rear passenger seat, my seat, was crushed. My father's one strange instruction saved my life. Let me hold the story right there for a second. You know how the dark creeps in slow? Well, so does a channel like this one. It grows one listener at a time, one night at a time. And that's where the subscribe button comes in. The bell beside it makes sure the dark always finds you when a new story's ready. No pressure, just an open door. Now let's pick up where we stopped. I was sleeping on my couch in college one night. It was not supposed to be anything unusual. At that point in my life, sleeping on the couch was not some rare thing. Sometimes in college, you crash wherever you feel comfortable, especially if you are tired, stressed, or just too lazy to move to your actual bed. The couch was in the living room, and right behind it we had windows that faced outside. Some streetlight came in through those windows at night, not bright enough to fully light the room, but enough to give everything a dim shape. It was that soft, weak, yellowish light that streetlights make when they come through glass and curtains. It did not make the room feel safe or warm. It made the furniture look shadowy, and it left corners darker than they should have been. The living room was quiet when I fell asleep. My roommates were somewhere in the bedrooms, past the doorway that led from the living room into the hall or bedroom area. It was a normal college living situation. Nothing fancy, nothing especially creepy during the day. There were probably the usual things around the room, couch cushions, random stuff left out. Maybe shoes or cups or whatever else people leave around in a shared college place. It was the kind of room that felt completely ordinary when people were awake, talking, watching TV, or coming and going. But at night, when everyone was asleep and the only light came from outside, it felt different. Still, I did not go to sleep feeling scared. I was not expecting anything. I just lay down on the couch and fell asleep like it was any other night. I woke up sometime around 2 or 3 in the morning. I do not know what woke me. There was no loud crash that I remember, no voice, no footsteps, no obvious reason for my eyes to open. I just woke up. That alone already felt strange because it was the middle of the night and the apartment was quiet. There is a certain kind of confusion that comes with waking up at that hour. Your brain is not fully ready to work, and for a few seconds you are stuck between sleep and reality. You know where you are, but you are also still half in a dream. I remember opening my eyes and looking toward the doorway from the living room to the bedrooms. That was when I saw her. There was a girl standing in the doorway. I immediately sat up. I did not slowly wake and wonder what I was seeing. I sat up fast, because the sight of her hit me all at once. My mind started racing, trying to make sense of what was in front of me. At first, some part of my brain wanted to think it had to be one of my roommates, or maybe someone visiting, or maybe a person who had somehow gotten into the apartment. But nothing about her looked normal. She was not standing there like a confused person who had walked into the wrong room. She was not looking around like she was lost. She was fixed in place, staring directly at me from the doorway. The streetlight coming from behind the couch gave just enough light for me to see her, but not in a comforting way. It lit her in pieces, showing details that I wish I could forget. Her eyes were the first thing that really terrified me. They were yellow, not soft or natural looking, but an evil yellow that seemed to glow with anger. I know that sounds dramatic, but that is exactly how they looked. They were fixed on me with this intense hatred, like she was not just looking at me, but furious that I was there, furious that I had seen her, furious at my existence. There was no confusion in her face, no sadness, no blank expression. It was anger, serious, focused anger. Her face was pale and bruised. The paleness made her look almost dead, and the bruising made her look like something terrible had happened to her. It was not a normal face you expect to see in a doorway in the middle of the night. It looked damaged, cold, and wrong. Her hair was long, black, and wet, hanging in pigtails. That detail has always stayed with me because it made her look childlike and horrifying at the same time. Pigtails are supposed to be innocent. They are something you associate with little girls, school, childhood, and simple things. But on her, with that pale, bruised face and those yellow eyes, they made her even more disturbing. The hair looked soaked, like she had come in from heavy rain or from somewhere wet and dark. It clung in a way that did not feel natural. She was wearing an old lace sleeping gown. It looked old-fashioned, not like something a person in a college apartment would wear. It had that fragile, antique look, the kind of clothing you might see in an old photograph or a ghost story. The gown made her seem out of time, like she did not belong in that apartment or that year or that room. And then there were the boots. She had on big black rain boots. That detail almost made no sense, and because of that, it scared me even more. An old lace sleeping gown and big black rain boots did not belong together. It was such a strange combination that my mind kept catching on it. The outfit looked like something from a nightmare, where details do not fit, but still feel horribly real. The strangest thing was the way she was standing. She was up on her tiptoes, not just slightly raised, not like she had shifted her weight for a second. She was standing on her tiptoes in the doorway, completely still, with her eyes locked on me. That made her whole body look tense and unnatural, like she was being pulled upward by something invisible or trying to make herself taller without moving. It was not a childlike pose. It was not playful. It was rigid and wrong. Her feet in those black rain boots should have made that impossible-looking stance awkward, but she held it like it was nothing. She just stood there, balanced on her toes, staring at me with pure anger. It scared the absolute hell out of me. For a few seconds, I just stared back. I could not move. I could not call out to my roommates. I could not even fully breathe. My mind was screaming that this could not be real, but my eyes were still seeing her. I was awake. I was sitting up. I could feel the couch under me. I could see the room around me. I could see the doorway. I could see her standing there. This was not one of those blurry half-dream shapes that disappears when you focus on it. She had details, too many details. The yellow eyes, the bruised face, the wet black pigtails, the lace gown, the rain boots, the tiptoes. My brain had no room to invent an explanation that fast. I kept staring at her, waiting for something to happen. I think part of me expected her to move toward me. That was my biggest fear in that moment. She was in the doorway to the bedrooms, which meant she was between me and my roommates. If I wanted help, I would have to go through that doorway, past her. That thought was impossible. There was no way I was walking toward her. Not for anything. I was trapped on the couch, with the windows behind me and this thing standing between me and the rest of the apartment. I blinked. When I opened my eyes, she was still there. That made it worse because blinking is supposed to fix things like that. When you think you see something strange in the dark, you blink and it turns back into a coat, a shadow, a chair, or a trick of light. But she did not immediately vanish. She stayed there, staring, so I blinked again. I remember blinking repeatedly, almost desperately, because there was no way this could be real. I kept telling myself that. There was no way. There was no way a pale, bruised girl with yellow eyes and wet pigtails was standing in my living room doorway at 3 in the morning. There was no way she was standing on tiptoes, angry and silent, staring at me like she hated me. Then, her head disappeared. It did not snap away. It did not turn. It disappeared as I blinked, like reality was slowly erasing her one piece at a time. Her head was gone first, and the rest of her was still there. That was almost worse than if she had vanished all at once. For a moment, I was staring at a body in the doorway without a head, and my mind could not handle it. I kept blinking. Then, her torso disappeared. The shape of her upper body faded away next, leaving less and less of her in the doorway. Finally, as I kept blinking, her lower body faded too. The black rain boots, the legs, the bottom of the gown, all of it went away until there was nothing there anymore. The doorway was empty, but it did not feel empty. I stayed sitting up on the couch. I do not remember deciding to stay there. I just could not move. My body refused to get up. The apartment was quiet again, and the doorway looked normal, but I did not trust it. I knew my roommates were beyond that doorway, and under any normal circumstance, I would have gone to them, woken someone up, and told them what had happened. But there was no way I was walking through that doorway, not after seeing her standing there. I could not make myself do it. The idea of stepping into the space where she had been was worse than staying alone on the couch. So I sat there. I do not know how long I stayed awake. I do not remember when I finally fell asleep again, or if it even counted as proper sleep. I just remember staying upright, watching the doorway, afraid to lie back down. Every shadow in the room felt wrong after that. The streetlights still came through the windows behind me, and the living room still had the same dim shapes. But now, everything looked like it could hide something. The doorway was the worst part. It was just a dark opening leading toward the bedrooms, but in my mind, I could still see her standing there on her toes, eyes burning yellow, face bruised and pale, hair wet, boots planted in that impossible position. At some point, exhaustion must have taken over because I woke up later in the same position, still sitting upright on the couch. That detail is one of the reasons I know how scared I was. I did not stretch out comfortably again. I did not forget about it and roll over. I stayed sitting up until sleep caught me like that. My body had chosen the position it felt safest in, and even sleep did not change it. When morning came, the room looked normal again in daylight, but I did not feel normal. I had seen something that did not fit into any category I knew. I always feel like I have to begin and end this story by saying I am not crazy, because I know how it sounds. I know a person hearing this might immediately think sleep paralysis, hallucination, dream, or some kind of half-awake state. And honestly, I understand why. If someone told me they woke up on a couch and saw a girl with yellow eyes standing in a doorway, then watched her fade away piece by piece as they blinked, I would probably wonder the same things. It sounds insane. I know it does. But I also know what I experienced. I was awake enough to sit up. I was awake enough to stare at her, to blink again and again, to stay sitting afterward, and to wake up later still sitting in that same position. I have had quite a number of paranormal encounters in my life, or at least experiences I would put in that category, because I cannot explain them easily. But this was the most terrifying thing I have ever seen. Not because it was the loudest or most dramatic, but because of how clear it was. She was not a quick shadow. She was not a sound in another room. She was there, in front of me, in the doorway, with details my mind could not shake loose afterward. The anger in her eyes was the worst part. I have thought about that many times. If she had looked sad or confused, maybe the memory would feel different. Still scary, but different. But she looked angry, deeply, violently angry, like she wanted me to know she hated me. I have tried to think of normal explanations. Maybe I was caught between sleep and waking, and my brain created a hypnopompic hallucination. That is possible. People see things when they wake up sometimes. Some people see figures, shadows, faces, or strange forms in the room. The brain can do strange things in the dark when it is half asleep. I know that. But the experience felt too long, too detailed, and too physically real for me to easily put it away as that. I was not paralyzed. I could sit up. I could blink. I could think. I could feel fear running through my body. I was not dreaming that I was on the couch. I was on the couch. I woke up there later in the same position. Maybe the streetlight and shadows created the shape. Maybe the doorway, furniture, and darkness lined up in a way that looked like a person. But that does not explain the details. A shadow does not have wet black pigtails. A pile of clothes does not have yellow eyes staring back with anger. A trick of light does not stand on tiptoes in black rain boots and fade piece by piece as you blink. I know how shadows work. I know how the mind can see faces in darkness. This did not feel like that. What makes it stay with me is not just the image, but the feeling that came with it. There was something hostile about her presence. I did not feel like I had accidentally seen a harmless ghost passing through. I felt like I was being watched by something that did not want me there, something that had been standing in that doorway with a purpose. She did not speak. She did not move. She did not need to. The anger in her eyes was enough. It filled the room. For a long time afterward, I hated thinking about that doorway. Even after the apartment was normal again, even after roommates were awake and life went on, the memory did not leave. That is how these things work sometimes. The world does not change for everyone else. Nobody else sees what you saw. The next day, people make coffee, go to class, joke around, and use the same hallway like nothing happened. But for you, the space is marked. You remember what stood there when everyone else was asleep. You remember what it felt like to be alone with it. I still do not know what she was. Maybe she was a nightmare that leaked into the waking world for a few seconds. Maybe she was some kind of spirit connected to the apartment, the building, or something I will never know about. Maybe she was a hallucination caused by waking suddenly at the wrong moment. Maybe there is a rational explanation I have not found. But none of those possibilities change the fact that, to me, she was there. I saw her. I stared at her. She stared back with those evil yellow eyes and that impossible anger. Then she vanished in pieces while I blinked, leaving me sitting on the couch, too terrified to move. I am not crazy, but I know this sounds crazy. I have accepted that. Some stories are like that. You can tell them as honestly as possible, and they still sound unbelievable, because the thing itself was unbelievable. All I can do is describe it the way it happened. I was sleeping on my couch in college, with streetlight coming through the windows behind me. I woke up around 2 or 3 in the morning and saw a pale, bruised girl in the doorway with wet black pigtails, an old lace sleeping gown, big black rain boots, and angry yellow eyes fixed on me. She was standing on her tiptoes, staring like she hated me. I blinked until she disappeared piece by piece. Then I stayed sitting up on the couch because there was no way I was walking through that doorway to my roommates. Out of all the strange things I have experienced, that one remains the most terrifying, because I can still see her exactly as she was. My parents have lived in the same house since I was 6 years old, and for most of my childhood, that house was simply home. It was the place where I grew up, where I learned the layout of every room, every hallway, every creak in the floor, and every sound the house made at night. When you live somewhere from such a young age, the place becomes part of you in a way. You know how the stairs sound when someone walks up them. You know which doors stick, which windows rattle in the wind, and which parts of the house feel warm or cold at different times of day. That kind of familiarity is supposed to make a house feel safe. And during the day, for the most part, it did. It looked normal. It felt normal. It was just my parents' house, the same house they had chosen when I was a little kid. But at night, especially when I was upstairs in my bedroom trying to fall asleep, that house became something else entirely. Growing up, I always felt like something was violently shaking my bed when I would try to go to sleep. I do not mean I felt a small vibration, or that the mattress settled, or that the old house made normal noises that a child could mistake for something scary. I mean, it felt like someone, or something, had taken hold of the bed and was shaking it on purpose. It did not feel random. It did not feel like pipes, wind, or the floor shifting. It felt directed. It felt personal. It felt like whatever was doing it wanted my attention. That was the worst part. Even as a child, I had this strong thought that if I acknowledged its existence, if I spoke to it, looked for it, called out, or even let it know I knew it was there, then something bad would happen. I did not know what that something was. I had no clear picture in my mind. I only knew that it would not be good. That feeling was not like normal childhood fear of the dark. Kids get scared at night. They imagine monsters in closets, faces at windows, hands under beds, and all the usual things. But this was different because there was a rule attached to it. A rule I felt in my whole body, even though no one had ever told it to me. Ignore it. Do not react. Do not peek. Do not speak. Do not give it what it wants. I was absolutely sure that the bed was being shaken specifically to make me say something or look out from under the blankets. It felt like a test, or like bait. If I gave it even the smallest reaction, it would know it had me. I know that sounds strange, especially coming from an adult looking back, but as a child, it felt completely clear. I did not understand what it was, but I understood that I had to pretend it was not happening. So I fell asleep every night, completely covered from head to toe in blankets. That became my way of surviving the room. It did not matter if it was hot. It did not matter if the air under the blanket felt thick or uncomfortable. I would pull the blanket over my head and tuck myself inside like I was hiding from the world. I did not leave my face out. I did not leave my feet out. I made sure there was no gap where I might accidentally see something, or something might see me. It became a nightly routine, but not a comforting one. It was not like a child building a cozy little nest. It was more like someone locking themselves inside the only shelter they had. I would lie there under the blanket, breathing quietly, trying to stay still, trying not to show fear while the bed shook beneath me. Sometimes I would tell myself it was nothing. I would try to be reasonable in the way a child can be reasonable. Maybe the house was old. Maybe someone was walking somewhere else and making the floor move. Maybe a truck passed outside. Maybe my own heartbeat made the mattress feel like it was moving. But those explanations never lasted long, because the feeling was too strong. The bed did not just tremble. It shook with force, as if something was trying to get me to respond. I could feel the movement through the mattress and through my body. The frame seemed to rattle. The blankets around me would feel like they were moving with it. I would close my eyes hard and tell myself not to move, not to breathe too loudly, not to make a sound. As I got older, it got worse. That is another part that makes it hard for me to explain away as a simple childhood fear. Most kids grow out of things like that. The dark becomes less scary. The closet becomes just a closet. The strange shadows become normal furniture. But this did not fade as I got older. If anything, it became stronger. The shaking seemed more intense, and the fear attached to it became heavier. There were nights when it honestly felt like my bed was being lifted off the ground. I cannot say for certain that it was, because I never looked. I never peeked out from under the blanket, not once. That was part of the rule. If I looked, I would be acknowledging it. If I looked, I would be giving it permission to do whatever came next. So I stayed hidden, even when the movement felt impossible. I would lie there, certain that the bed was rising or being shoved or pulled, and I would not move. The feeling in those moments was not just fear. It was dread, complete and total dread. It felt like life or death, even though I could not explain why. There were no words in my mind like, I am going to die. It was deeper than words. It was the kind of fear animals must feel when they sense a predator nearby. My body knew I had to stay still. My body knew I had to ignore it. I would sweat under the blanket and feel too hot, but I would not uncover even my face. I would sometimes hold my breath without meaning to, then force myself to breathe slowly because I was afraid any sign of panic might count as a reaction. It sounds ridiculous in daylight, but at night, in that room, it felt like the most important thing in the world. For years, I carried that experience mostly as my own private childhood terror. I knew what people would say if I explained it. They would say sleep paralysis. And honestly, that is what I thought too once I got older and learned more about it. Sleep paralysis seemed like the easy answer. It can make people feel like something is in the room. It can make people feel pressure, movement, danger, or a presence they cannot see. It can be terrifying and feel completely real. So for a long time, I tried to place my childhood memories into that box. Maybe I had been half asleep. Maybe my body had been frozen while my mind imagined the shaking. Maybe the bed never moved at all. Maybe it was just my brain misfiring at the edge of sleep. That explanation helped a little because it gave me something normal to hold on to. It made the memory feel less impossible. But then, when I was in my early 20s, I brought a lady friend home to meet my parents. Because we did not want to make baby Jesus cry, she stayed in my bedroom while I slept downstairs on the living room sofa. That was the arrangement. It was a little funny, a little awkward, and completely normal for visiting parents. She got the bedroom, I took the sofa, and we all went to sleep. Nothing about that night seemed like it was going to drag all of my old childhood fear back into the open. I was older by then. I was not a little kid hiding under blankets anymore. I had mostly convinced myself that whatever I experienced in that room had been sleep paralysis, nightmares, childhood imagination, or some strange mix of all three. I did not warn her about the room. Why would I? I did not want to sound insane, and I did not truly expect anything to happen to her. The bed shaking was part of my past, or at least I wanted to believe it was. The first night, everything seemed fine at first. We went to bed, her upstairs in my old room and me downstairs on the sofa. I fell asleep like normal. The house was quiet. There was no reason to think anything was wrong. Then, sometime around 3 or 4 in the morning, she woke me up. She was furious. At first, she thought I had been shaking the bed and trying to scare her. She was angry in that sharp, half-asleep way people get when they think someone has played a cruel joke on them in the middle of the night. I remember being confused because I had been asleep downstairs. I had not gone upstairs. I had not touched the bed. I had not done anything. For a moment, she was mad, and then I think she realized I really had been asleep. She could see I was not pretending. I was groggy, confused, and clearly not in the middle of a prank. Her anger changed almost immediately into fear. That shift scared me more than the anger had. She asked me what was going on in that room. She said it felt like the bed had been lifted off the ground and shaken. Not just shaken a little, She described it like something wanted to throw her onto the ground. Those words hit me hard because she had described the thing I had felt for years. She did not know about my childhood experience. I had not planted the idea in her head. I had not told her the room was strange. She went into that room with no warning and woke up describing the same kind of violent bed movement that had haunted me as a kid. That was the moment the sleep paralysis explanation stopped feeling good enough. I know people can have strange sleep experiences in unfamiliar places. I know guests can wake up scared in an old house. I know dreams can feel real. But what are the chances that someone with no knowledge of my childhood fear would sleep in that same bed, in that same room, and wake me up accusing me of shaking it, then say it felt like the bed had been lifted and shaken like something wanted to throw her to the floor? That was too close. It was not vague. She did not say she had a bad dream. She did not say she felt watched or heard a noise. She described the bed moving violently, the same thing I had felt again and again for years. That confirmation did not make me feel better. It made everything worse. Before that, I could tell myself it had all been in my head. Maybe it was sleep paralysis. Maybe it was a child's imagination. Maybe I had remembered it as worse than it was. But after she experienced it too, I had to face the possibility that something was actually happening in that room. Maybe not something supernatural, but something outside my own mind. Something connected to the room, the bed, or the house. And if it had happened to her too, then all those nights I spent under the blankets as a child suddenly felt less like irrational fear and more like instinct. The strangest thing is that even now, at 43, I still hate being in my parents' house by myself. I do not like being upstairs alone there, even if other people are downstairs. That house still has a hold on me that no other place does. It is not because I am easily scared of old houses. I live by myself in a creaky old house now, and I do not have any issue with it. My own house makes noises. It settles. It creaks. It has dark corners and old house sounds, but they do not bother me. I can walk through it at night without feeling like I need to run. I can sleep there alone. I can hear a floorboard pop or a pipe knock and not immediately feel dread. So it is not just old houses. It is that house. My parents' house, that upstairs area, that room. There is something about being there that brings back the same feeling I had as a child. Even if nothing happens, the memory is waiting. I can be upstairs and suddenly feel like I do not want to turn my back on the hallway. I can be alone in the house and feel that old pressure in my chest, that sense that I should not draw attention to myself. It is strange to be a grown man and still feel marked by a room from childhood. I can reason with myself all I want. I can say I am 43, I live alone, I am not afraid of every noise, and I do not believe every strange memory means something paranormal. But my body remembers that room differently. My body remembers hiding under blankets, feeling the bed shake, and knowing I must not look. I have tried to think of normal explanations. Maybe there was something structural in the house. Maybe vibrations traveled through the floor from heating, plumbing, traffic, or some appliance. Maybe the bed frame was loose and amplified small movements. Maybe I had some kind of recurring sleep disorder, and my lady friend happened to experience something similar due to stress or unfamiliar surroundings. Maybe there is an explanation that would make perfect sense if someone inspected the room carefully. I do not want to jump straight to ghosts or demons or anything like that. I really do want a rational answer. But none of the simple explanations fit cleanly. A little vibration does not feel like a bed being lifted. Pipes do not make you feel like something wants to throw you to the ground. Sleep paralysis does not explain another person having the same experience in the same room without knowing your story. What stays with me most is the feeling that it wanted attention. That was always the impression I had as a child. The shaking did not feel like a random side effect of something else. It felt like a demand. Look at me. Say something. Admit I am here. And I never did. I never gave it that. Maybe that was childish thinking, but it felt like survival. My lady friend, on the other hand, did not know the rule. She did not know to hide under the blankets and pretend nothing was happening. She woke up angry, thinking I was doing it, and then became scared when she realized I was not. Maybe that is what makes her experience so unsettling to me. She reacted like a normal person would react if a bed started moving. I reacted like someone who had been trained since childhood not to react at all. I do not know what was in that room. I do not know if anything was in that room. Maybe the answer is buried in some ordinary detail I have never found. But I know what I felt, and I know what she felt. I know I spent years falling asleep with blankets over my head because I believed acknowledging whatever shook my bed would lead to something worse. I know the shaking grew stronger as I got older, to the point where it felt like the bed was being lifted. I know that years later, someone else slept in that room and came downstairs furious and scared because the same thing had happened to her. And I know that even now, decades later, I can live alone in a creaky old house without fear. But I still do not like being upstairs alone in my parents' house. That is the part I cannot shake. Childhood fears usually fade when you grow up. Mine did not fade completely, because one night in my 20s, someone else confirmed the thing I had spent years trying to explain away. Maybe it was sleep paralysis. Maybe it was something physical in the house. Maybe it was something I do not have a name for. Whatever it was, it made a child hide under blankets every night. And years later, it made an adult guest wake up, convinced the bed was being shaken hard enough to throw her off. So that is fun, and not at all terrifying. At around 13 or 14 years of age, my mom's partner and his kids moved in with us. It was a big change in the house, the kind of change that shifts the whole feeling of a place almost overnight. Before that, it had just been us, with our normal routines and our normal way of living. Then suddenly there were new people in the rooms, new voices in the hallway, new habits, new arguments, new footsteps, and that strange awkwardness that comes when two families are trying to become one household. His daughter was about the same age as me, so in a way it made sense for us to spend time together. His son was about the same age as my little brother, maybe 6 or 7. So the younger kids had each other too. It was not always easy, but at that age you adjust because you have to. You get used to sharing space, sharing the television, sharing attention, and pretending you are fine with changes you did not choose. I had lived in that house long enough by then that I knew its sounds and its moods. I knew the way the floorboards creaked in certain places, the way the heating sounded, the way the kitchen felt different late at night, and the way shadows moved along the hallway when lights from outside passed through the windows. I was not a child who jumped at every noise. I was not walking around terrified of the house. In fact, the strange thing I saw there never really scared me when I was younger. It was just there. It had been part of the background of my life for so long that I did not question it much. That sounds strange to say now, because as an adult I understand how odd it is. But when you are a child, and something happens often enough, you start to treat it as normal, even if it is not. For years, I would see a shadow figure in the house. I do not mean I saw it once during a nightmare, or caught a quick shape out of the corner of my eye and turned it into something bigger in my imagination. I mean, I saw it again and again, often enough that it became familiar. It was not a full person in detail. It was more like a dark shape, small like a child, and it moved through the same area of the house many times. The place I remember most strongly is the kitchen and the hallway around it. Sometimes it seemed to be near the kitchen doorway. Sometimes it seemed to move across the space as if it had somewhere to go. It was not tall like an adult. It had the size and shape of a little boy. That was the impression I always had, even before anyone else said it. A small shadow, child-sized, quick and quiet. I did not talk about it. I cannot say exactly why. It was not because someone told me not to, and it was not because I had some dramatic secret I was keeping. I think I simply did not know how to bring it up. When something is part of your daily life from a young age, you do not always realize other people are not experiencing the same thing. Also, children are careful in ways adults forget. You learn quickly what sounds believable and what does not. If I told an adult I saw a shadow boy moving around the kitchen, they would probably say it was my imagination, or that I was tired, or that I had seen a coat, or a reflection, or a trick of light. So I said nothing. I watched it, noticed it, and carried on. Then one night, for some reason, I decided to tell my mom's partner's daughter about it. I do not remember exactly what made me bring it up. Maybe we were talking in the way teenagers do late at night, when the house is quiet and people start sharing things they would never say in daylight. Maybe something happened that reminded me of the figure. Maybe I had seen it again and finally wanted to know whether anyone else had noticed it. Whatever the reason, I started to tell her. I think it was the first time I had ever spoken about it to anyone. That alone made the moment feel strange. The words felt awkward coming out of my mouth, like I was saying something I had kept hidden without meaning to. I began to explain that there was a shadow figure I would see in the house. I could not even get the full sentence out before she got excited. She cut in almost immediately, saying something like, "Oh my God, I see that too. It's a wee boy." She said it with such certainty that it stopped me cold. She was not confused. She was not pretending to understand. She knew exactly what I was talking about before I even had time to describe it properly. That moment changed everything for me. Until then, the figure had been something private, something I had quietly accepted but never examined. Hearing someone else say they saw it too made it real in a different way. It was no longer just something inside my own head. It was something another person had seen, and not just any person, but someone who had only recently moved into the house. She had no reason to know about it from me, because I had never spoken about it before. Her reaction sparked a curiosity in me that I had never really felt about the figure before. For the first time, I started asking questions. If she had seen it, maybe others had too. Maybe it was not just me. Maybe it had been there all along, seen by different people at different times, silently moving through the house while everyone lived around it. I went to my little brother and asked him about it. I expected him to be confused, or maybe to laugh, or to ask what I meant. Instead, he responded like I had asked him about something completely ordinary. He said, "Yeah, the shadow boy in the kitchen." He said it as if I had asked about a chair, or a cupboard, or a pet we all knew was there. No fear, no surprise, no big reaction. Just a simple answer. The shadow boy in the kitchen. That casual response unsettled me more than if he had been scared. He was only around 6 or 7, and to him it seemed like a normal fact of the house. He had seen it too, and apparently he had accepted it in the same quiet way I had. That made at least 3 of us. Me, my mom's partner's daughter, and my little brother. 3 kids in the same house had seen the same small shadow figure, and none of us had sat together making it up beforehand. I asked the other boy, too, my mom's partner's son, the one around my brother's age. He had never seen it. That detail is important to me because it makes the whole thing feel less like a shared game or a group story. If all of us had immediately agreed and started adding details, maybe someone could say we were just feeding off each other. But he had not seen it. He did not join in. He did not pretend. He simply had no experience with it. Then I asked the adults. None of them had seen anything. They did not take it seriously. They thought we were making it up, or being silly, or maybe trying to scare each other. From their point of view, that probably made sense. A group of kids talking about a shadow boy in the house sounds exactly like the kind of thing kids would invent. But from our side, it was not a game. At least, not for me. I had seen it too many times before that conversation ever happened. The adults dismissing it did not stop me from thinking about it. If anything, it made the mystery stronger. Why had the kids seen it, but not the adults? Why did my little brother know exactly what I meant? Why had the girl who moved in seen the same thing without me ever telling her? Why was the kitchen the place we all seemed to connect with? Those questions did not have answers, and over time they stayed with me more than the fear did. Because again, at the time, I was not terrified. It is strange to admit that, because if I saw something like that now, I would probably react very differently. But as a child, I did not have the same adult need to explain everything. Children can live beside the strange more easily. They can accept things because their world is already full of things they do not fully understand. Adults want categories. Adults want reasons. Adults want proof. Children just notice and move on. I am a 40-year-old man now, and I consider myself fairly rational. I do not go through life believing every strange sound is a ghost. I do not spend my time looking for paranormal explanations. In fact, I do not really believe in ghosts. I have never been someone who automatically accepts stories about spirits or hauntings. I think most strange things probably have normal causes. Shadows, reflections, tired eyes, old houses, overactive imaginations, memory changing over time, people influencing each other without meaning to. All of those explanations are possible in many cases. I understand that. I believe in looking for the simple answer first. But this is one thing from my childhood that I still cannot explain. What troubles me now is not that I saw a shadow figure once. A single sighting could be dismissed. It could have been a trick of light, a half-dream, a moment of confusion. What troubles me is that I saw it as a repeated, daily kind of phenomenon. It was not a one-time scare. It was part of the house. I saw it enough that I knew where it usually appeared and what shape it seemed to have. Then, when I finally mentioned it, another child knew about it before I could describe it. Then my little brother confirmed it in the most casual way possible, calling it the shadow boy in the kitchen. That combination has never sat right with me. If it was only in my head, why did they see it too? If it was only imagination, why did our descriptions line up without planning? If it was only shadows in the house, why did it appear to some of us and not others? The fact that it did not scare me then almost makes it scarier now. Back then, I accepted it because I had no choice. It was just something that happened. Now, as an adult, I look back and realize how strange that is. I was living in a house where a child-sized shadow figure appeared often enough that multiple children recognized it. We talked about it like it was something real, while the adults dismissed it. And then, life went on. No big investigation, no dramatic ending, no priest, no medium, no explanation. We just lived there with that unanswered thing moving through the background. I have often wanted to go back to that house and see if it still happens. The thought has crossed my mind many times over the years. I wonder who lives there now. I wonder if they have children. I wonder if anyone in that house still catches a small shadow moving near the kitchen. I wonder if some kid living there today has quietly noticed the same thing and has not told anyone because they think they are the only one. I wonder if the new owners ever feel watched in the hallway, or if they hear movement where nobody is standing, or if their own children have a name for something the adults cannot see. The curiosity is still there because the question has never been answered. But of course, I cannot exactly knock on the door and ask to walk through their hallway. New owners would probably phone the police if a strange man showed up saying he used to live there and wanted to check whether the shadow boy was still in the kitchen. I would not blame them. It would sound completely mad. There is no normal way to ask that question. So I suppose I will never know. The house has gone on without me, and whatever was happening there either stopped, continued, or was explained by something I never discovered. That is the part I struggle with most, not knowing. I am not looking for a dramatic answer. I do not need someone to tell me it was definitely a ghost. In fact, I would almost prefer a normal explanation, something practical and clear. Maybe there was a strange lighting effect in the kitchen. Maybe headlights from passing cars made a child-shaped shadow move across the wall at certain times. Maybe there was some reflection from a window, a mirror, or polished surface that created the illusion. Maybe the layout of the house caused shadows to stretch in a way that looked like a small person. Maybe children are simply more likely to notice moving shapes and turn them into figures. Maybe one of us influenced the others without realizing it, even though I still cannot remember ever speaking about it before that night. I have thought of all those possibilities, and some of them sound reasonable from a distance, but none of them fully explain the experience as I remember it. They do not explain the certainty in the girl's voice when she said she saw it too. They do not explain my little brother's completely normal reaction, like the shadow boy in the kitchen was common knowledge. They do not explain why it felt like a repeated daily thing rather than a random trick of the light. And they do not explain why the memory still feels so clear after all these years. I do not believe in ghosts, but I also do not believe in pretending something makes sense when it does not. This is one of the few experiences in my life that sits outside the box. I can talk around it, question it, doubt my memory, and search for logical answers, but the core of it remains the same. As a child, I saw a small shadow figure in the house. Another child saw it too. My little brother saw it and knew it as the shadow boy in the kitchen. The adults saw nothing and thought we were making it up. I grew up, became a rational man, and still cannot explain what happened. It did not scare me when I was young, but it kind of scares me now. Not because I think it was definitely a ghost, and not because I believe something evil was in the house. It scares me because there is a blank space where an explanation should be. It scares me because multiple children saw the same thing and treated it as normal. It scares me because I can still remember that feeling of the house, the kitchen, the hallway, and the small dark figure that moved through it like it belonged there. And after all these years, I still do not know what we were seeing. If someone can offer an explanation for what happened, I would honestly welcome it. I would like there to be a simple reason. I would like to be able to look back and say, that was just a shadow from the street, or that was a reflection, or that was how kids process a strange house. Maybe one of those answers is true. Maybe the explanation is completely ordinary and I just never found it. But until I do, the shadow boy in the kitchen remains one of the strangest memories of my life, and the one thing from childhood that my rational adult mind still cannot put away. If you've stayed with me this far, then these stories didn't simply pass the time. They stayed with you. Everything you heard tonight was real. Real people. Real moments. And in each one, something quietly slipped out of place. If you'd like more of the kind that don't let go so easily, subscribe to Crowvane Manor. There are more rooms left open and more stories waiting behind every door. I'm grateful you spent this part of your night here. Rest well, and I'll be waiting when you return.